This meeting is being recorded.
Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaityakena yopakurutam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranjali anatosmi stuve patanjalim vyasam shankaram cha munitrayam katra sutrasya bhashisya kramat vivaranasya cha. We are going to discuss the 8th and 9th sutras. It's a continuation. So in the coming sutras, Patanjali talks about 3 kinds of mental transformations. Transformation is called parinama in the language of Patanjali. One is nirodha parinama, which is discussed in the 9th sutra, and then ekagrita parinama, which is discussed in the 12th sutra, and then samadhi parinama, which is the lowest of the 3, discussed in the 11th sutra. So Patanjali has not arranged the sutra in a specific order, either ascending order or descending order, but it speaks a lot about the way we go through different emotions and feelings and experiences. And eventually, he also talks about, of course, we should know that in Patanjali's system, 3 types of samadhis are discussed. One is, of course, the samyama, that is dharana, dhyana, samadhi. The 6th, 7th, and 8th stages of the Ashtanga Yoga. Then there is samprajñāta samadhi. Then there is asamprajñāta samadhi. I mean sabija samadhi and nirbija samadhi. The highest state is asamprajñāta, where you go beyond even what we normally understand by the word samyama, which actually includes dharana, dhyana and samadhi, where you go beyond mind. We should remember there is a fundamental difference between the Vedantic approach to the functions of mind, what we call samskaras, impressions, and the way Patanjali looks at them. In Patanjali's system, the last stage is a stage which is called samskara sesha, where you transcend samskaras, but you do not completely eradicate samskaras. Complete eradication, complete destruction of samskaras is mentioned in the Vedantic, to be more specific, in the Advaitic literature. It's called Vasana Kshaya in the language of post-Shankarite Vedantis like Vidyaranya and others. Now, the 7th sutra we already discussed actually, that is Trayam Antarangam Purvebhya. That is, this Trayam here means this Samyama, that is Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi, 6th, 7th and 8th state. It is internal. It is internal means it is closer to the highest spiritual goal in that sense. It is called Antarangam. I mean internal, closer to the absolute goal, the highest goal. The 8th sutra says Tadabi Bahirangyam Nirbijasya. But this Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi, this Samyama itself, which is actually Antaranga for some Sampragnata Yoga, but it is only Bahiranga for the highest Asampragnata Samadhi. That's the implication. Actually, we discussed this earlier. And we discussed this mostly, in the context of another sutra, where Patanjali emphasizes the point that everything should be done stage by stage. That is, tasya bhumishu viniyogaka. Means one should have completed the first stage before evolving to the next stage. The ninth sutra is very important. Vyuthana nirodha samskarayohu abhibhava pradurbhavu nirodha kshanachittanyaha nirodha parinamaha. This is the sutra, the ninth sutra. What it means is, Vyuthana samskara and nirodha samskara. The Vyuthana nirodha samskarayohu means Vyuthana samskarasya, nirodha samskarasya. So Vyuthana, what is Vyuthana samskara? To give an example, unpleasant memories, negative impressions, negative ideas that frequently emerge in our mind. They emerge in that sense, Vyuthana. The Vyuthana has got a different meaning in Vedanta, of course. That's a different thing. So here, what it means is negative tendencies, unpleasant tendencies, mostly from previous actions that we have done or we have somehow encountered, or some events that we were witnesses of, we witnessed in the past. So those memories, impressions will emerge in the mind. In fact, that's a serious problem. That's the first and most important problem and obstacle in meditative practices or any kind of spiritual practice. Whether not necessarily when you try to pray or meditate, but even when you try to read a good book, actually, read a sublime book, a book that is not sufficiently attractive to the senses, not very eye-catching, not very entertaining a book when we read or when you listen to a lecture which is not very entertaining, not too much of comedy, we speak some very important spiritual truths. If we are not mentally ready, if our samskaras are not ready, we may feel a great distraction. We won't be able to focus on what we are listening to, what we are hearing, if our mind is not ready for it. And that's because negative tendencies, negative impressions, negative memories will emerge in the mind, will prevent us from focusing more and more or concentrating more and more what we are doing. This happens mostly when you try to pray and meditate. It could happen. So that is an example of Vyuthana. And what is Nirodha Samskara? Nirodha Samskara is good samskaras. Suppose we have given a lot of healthy food to the mind. What is healthy food to the mind? Just as when we eat bad food, the body falls sick. But so also when we eat bad mental food, spiritual food, then mind also falls sick. And the sickness expresses itself in anxieties, in worries, and in the form of Vyuthana Samskaras, negative tendencies. We are not able to sit for a long time while praying and meditating or even reading a good book or listening to some great ideas. So what happens? Nirodha Samskaras are the positive samskaras, healthy samskaras, which we generate, a spiritual energy that we generate through Karma Yoga, through the practice of disinterested actions, prayers, meditations, participation in spiritual events, all will help us to generate spiritual energy and also to produce a lot of Nirodha Samskaras. So what this sutra tells you is Vyuthana Nirodha Samskarayohu Abhibhava Pradurbhavo. So Abhibhava means it is suppressed, defeated. Pradurbhava means it rises. So if we really start practicing yamas, niyamas, etc. properly as a very foundation, what happens is we are able to generate a lot of this Nirodha Samskara. And this Nirodha Samskara will immediately block or suppress or defeat or neutralize negativity, negative samskaras in our mind. And all this happen at the subconscious level. If this we can very easily relate in our life if we think of what happens or what really we go through when we start practicing our spiritual disciplines at the early part of our life. When we first start doing prayer and meditation, after listening to some great ideas, we may have a great desire to practice meditation. And then at the beginning, we feel great distraction, disturbance. That's because the Vyuthana Samskaras, they are emerging. They constitute a legacy of unpleasant activities. We call negativity, we may call it. Suppose we cannot meditate, but we try to meditate. And when we feel that we are not able to meditate for a long time, then there is another way. We can train our mind to become more ready to meditate. Not by forcing, no, I will not get up from here till I sit here for 1 hour. That is totally wrong. It doesn't mean that whenever there is a disturbance, you should get out and stop meditation. No, that's not the meaning. The implication is forcing oneself too much into doing, especially in meditation, is not a very healthy practice. So what we must do? Well, I cannot meditate. I cannot sit and concentrate on a great idea. Why can't I go and read a good book? Some good books, listen to some good ideas, great music, some spiritual ideas. Again, not outwardly attractive programs, but ideas which generate spiritual food, spiritual energies in our mind. And when this happens, we are actually generating spiritual energy. And that spiritual energy becomes Nirodha Samskara. Why it's called Nirodha Samskara? It does Nirodha, it blocks. So when we continue practicing this, after some time we find, a disturbing thought comes to you when you meditate. Immediately a pleasant, healthy thought comes and blocks it. So you are able to sit, you are able to continue sitting for meditation for a long time. And this happens at the subconscious level. We can very easily happen here. We can easily relate this in our own life. If you are in the habit of reading some, let's say, the stories, lives of great saints, spiritual personalities, or maybe spiritual literature, whatever religion you may belong to, any spiritual literature, or these practices will generate some memories, some impressions, and they get accumulated in the mental system, again subconscious level. And then suppose after some time you go and meditate, a disturbing thought comes. Immediately you can say, what about Buddha? Buddha could meditate for a long time, so I shall also try. You have read the lives of Buddha, you may have read the Jataka tales, you may have read some conversations, dialogues, you may have read verses from the Gita, or some great statements from the Bible, the Sermon on the Mount, great parables, any tradition for the matter. So you can think of that. Immediately the negative tendencies, negative impressions are suppressed. So that's why it happens, this Vitthana Samskara, it goes through Abhibhava, means it is completely suppressed, defeated, put down, neutralized by Nirodha Samskara. And when this happens, we are able to continue meditation. So I must mention that this Nirodha Parinama, which is implied in the 9th Sutra, it is actually the highest. So 9th Sutra talks about Nirodha Parinama, the highest modification. As I mentioned, 12th Sutra, that is, it talks about the Ekagrita Parinama, that is the second highest, and Samadhi Parinama talks about the lowest of the three, that is Samyama. So these are the important aspects here. And then next sutra, of course, we have to. There is a the order way it is mentioned is different. I mean the order of the mental modifications is not closely. It doesn't closely tally with the arrangement of the sutras. The 10th sutra says Tasya Prashantavahida Samskarat. So Tasya Prashanta, Tasya here means Chittasya, that is mind. When this Vitthana Samskara is completely blocked, neutralized, this negativity, disturbing thought currents, distractions are completely blocked. And when this Nirodha Samskara, by these positive samskaras, positive tendencies, when they emerge, what happens? Then you will have this continuous Prashanta Vahita. Prashanta Vahita actually could mean a continuity, continuous flow, stability of these higher positive samskaras. So this helps us in our spiritual life. When this happens, as I mentioned in my last session, what happens? We slowly get complete freedom from the normal obstacles that stand in the way of our spiritual practices. What are the normal obstacles? I mentioned they are called antarayas. They are mentioned not here, they are mentioned in the 30th Sutra and 31st Sutra. You can find there is a list of some of the obstacles that we normally face. That is Vyadhi, Sthana, Samsaya, Pramada, Alasya, Aviradi, Bhranti Darsana, Alabdha Bhumigatva, Anavasthitattvani, Chitta Vikshepaha, Tayantarayaha. Actually, these are all Vikshepa, psychology. This psychology of problems, spiritual problem. That's what this is discussed here. I mean, disease, language that is, some kind of a mental, physical illness, indecision, carelessness, sloth, laziness, sensuality, sometimes some kind of mistaken notion. It all happens because of the Vitthana Samskaras. Vitthana Samskaras emerge, negative Samskaras emerge, and they create, they disturb the mental lake, creating waves. So, and these distractions take the form of Vyadhi, Sthana, Alasya, etc. Means laziness, indecision, disease. So here disease, we should remember it is not physical disease that is implied here. Physical disease can be a consequence of these antarayas. See, when you become lazy, when you are suffering from indecision as a pathological problem, doubts and mistaken notion, and when all these tendencies become a pathological problem, it can certainly eventually lead to physical illness of different forms of physical illness. It could happen. But what happens is, here the implication is, it happens at the psychological level. And then they have their external manifestations which are mentioned in the 31st Sutra. I discussed this briefly in my last session. That is, Dukkha Daumanasya Angame Jayatva Swasa Praswasa Vikshepa Saha Bhuvaka. That means pain, despair, shakiness, inspiration and expiration. Means sometimes people face these problems. In fact, there are some books which say that pranayama, when not properly studied and when not properly practiced, can also create some of these problems. Pranayama, when not properly studied from a teacher, and when overdone, when done to an extreme level without any discipline with regard to food, associations and so on, can cause problems. You can try physically this variable. If you take a strong coffee, or still worse, some alcoholic drinks, please don't try this. And then you practice pranayama, people will start facing this flight of ideas, wandering mind, extreme excitement, manic excitement, which will inevitably be followed by melancholia or depression. This happens. So, what it says is, yamas and the yamas should be properly practiced, and some of these problems mentioned in the 31st Sutra, which are external manifestations of 9 antarayas mentioned in the 30th Sutra, they all can happen to people who overdo things or who do things in a very improper manner without going through any instruction from a teacher. That's the idea behind. And they all can directly or indirectly produce some kinds of vitthana samskaras. Now what's the 10th sutra tells you, tasya prashantavahida samskarat. I mean, when this nirodha samskara increases, then vitthana samskara gets completely neutralized, and then the mind, chittasya prashantavahida, the mind, chittam, becomes very, very peaceful, tranquil, and you feel a kind of inner serenity and peace. So that's the idea behind. So the sutra is this Shandu, that is, 10th sutra is given else end. The sutras are not properly organized, as I mentioned here. That is, tasya prashantavahida samskarat. Because of the increase of nirodha samskaras, what happens by the transformation goes on without a break. So the prashantavahida means here. Vahida means continuous flow without a break. That peace, tranquility, the inner peace and serenity continue. That's the idea behind. Of course, here Vajaspati has got something very interesting to say. Tattwamayananda says, what he says, vitthana samskara mala rahida nirodha parampara matra vahida prashanta vahida. This is Vajaspati. So Vajaspati is the author of Tattwamayananda. That's a well-known commentary. So Vajaspati explains this 10th sutra. In one context, what he says is Vyuthana samskara mala lekhida nirodha parampara matra vahida. So Vyuthana samskara mala lekhida. So mala is dirt or filth. What is the dirt and filth? Vyuthana samskara is called something to be removed, something to be eradicated, the filth and dirt of human mind. That is negativity, negative tendencies, and impressions and memories that emerge from the mind when you try to meditate. When, if not even meditation, which is certainly more subtle form of karma yoga, practice, even when you have a strong desire to do something noble, something unselfish, something that does a lot of good to you and good to others, one part of the mind suddenly can block it. And that is an example of this vitthana samskara. Oh, I need not unnecessarily spend time, energy and money for helping somebody. It's waste. So it's a negative thought current can emerge. But if you have read the life of Buddha, Christ or Sri Ramakrishna or Shankaracharya, if you have led life, if you have fed your mind, if you have given a lot of good food to your mind, mind has already acquired a lot of good food. And that good food, that good associations is one way of giving good food to the mind. Listening to great ideas is another way. These are different ways. Reading great books is another way. If you have done it, then immediately this selfish thought will be blocked. Nirodha samskara will come and give a blow on his head. No, you tell your own mind you are becoming too selfish. That's totally wrong. So a higher mind, a higher personality emerges in our mind. And then what happens is, this vitthana samskara, negativity, which is dirt and filth, be washed away completely. That's what Vachaspati says. So Malarahita is completely free from this vitthana samskara malam. Means it's totally free from the dirt of mind. That is selfish thoughts. Then what happens? Nirodha parampara matra vahida. Parampara actually means continuation, Parampara. Guru parampara means a continuous succession of great teachers, disciples, and their disciples is called the Guru Sishya Prachishya parampara in Sanskrit. A succession, a lineage of great teachers is parampara. Parampara means a continuous process, continuation of teachers. It's called Vahida, it's a flow, unbroken flow. Matra Vahida, Prashanta Vahida. And what happens is, we become totally free from impurities of vitthana samskaras. So, according to this interpretation of Vachaspati in the Tattwamayananda, what it means is, Nirodha means the stoppage of all the vrittis. So sometimes, people like Vachaspati, they would tell you that this Nirodha Samskara is actually, it is Samprajnata itself. There are minor differences among the commentators, but after all, you need not be confused about it. But even reading these books itself is one way of generating Nirodha Samskara. To take interest in philosophy, higher philosophy, not philosophy that questions values and higher concepts. Higher philosophy, mysticism, reading and taking an intellectual interest in these things itself will produce some good food in the mind. So that's why Vijnana Bhikshu says differently. He has a different interpretation, but he has given a different interpretation. According to him, Nirodha takes place not only during asamprajnata, but also during samprajnata. Of course, I am not going to these different views. It could be slightly disconcerting for the beginners. Those who are interested, we can discuss later. So this is about the 10th sutra. Now let's see the 11th sutra. It's also actually very important. It's all continuation. 11th sutra, as I mentioned earlier, it actually talks about samadhi parinama, which is the lowest of this, lowest. Sarvarthata ekagritayohu kshayodayo chittasya samadhi parinamaha. So, sarvarthata ekagritayohu, Sarvarthada, ekagrita. These are two words used here. What is sarvarthada? Artha means, in Sanskrit, means objects. Sarva means everything. The natural tendency for the mind to go after everything. Whatever it sees, it becomes connected with. That is called sarvarthada. So, it means viksheba, distraction, dissipation, confusion. Sometimes you may listen to something and then mind goes about wandering, and then you may try to identify yourself with that. Unnecessarily, wrong identification. So some time back in one of my talks long ago, I gave the example of sarvarthada. We sometimes foolishly, wrongly identify ourselves with everything that happens in front of us. So I was thinking of a person, somebody was cooking in his kitchen, and water was boiling. But this man had a lot of energy. So he was standing right in front of the stove. The water was boiling. Oh, water is boiling. How long it will take for the water to boil? And he was getting crazy, thinking too much about things which are absolutely of no use. Then a wiser man, an older man came. See, why should you worry about it? You need not stand in front of the boiling water, the stove. Even if you sit on an easy chair and start reading a newspaper, the water will boil. The water doesn't ask you to stand in front of it and show your concern, your anxiety for the water to boil properly. It's not asking you to participate in this act of boiling water. You just switch on the stove, sit on an easy chair, and watch the whole thing. Why should you worry about it? In a way, this is an example of sarvarthada. Sometimes we unnecessarily become worried and concerned about things which are absolutely of no concern to us. So the mind goes after different objects. That called artha means objects, sarva means everything. The natural tendency of the mind to experience is vikshepa, distraction, dissipation, unnecessary identification with things without any necessity. It is called sarvarthada. Now, this can happen frequently in our life. And then there is another experience, ekagrita. Ekagrita means the opposite of sarvarthada. Means you focus your mind on something steadily, not on everything. So if you're doing a research, you are maybe scientist doing his work in a laboratory, concentration, where he is able to put his whole mind, all the what we call mental pratyayas are continuously focused on one object. That is called ekagrita. Agra means end, ega means one. So, the sharp edge of a knife, it has only one end, one edge. So, that's called ekagrita. So, this sutra tells you that sarvarthada ekagritayoho, kshayodayo, they come and they go. One after another. Now we feel a lot of ekagrita, concentration, focus, and after some time we experience distraction. So again we are able to concentrate on certain things. Again we experience distraction. This continues. This is actually the beginning of one spiritual pursuit. We are able to concentrate on what we want to do. We are very much interested in it. But frequently we are not able to do that. But sometimes we are able to concentrate with great focus. That is ekagrita. We may listen to a lecture, we may attend a prayer, we feel everything is wonderful, mind is fully concentrated. We go back to your home and then we feel distraction, disturbance. Again, next day, again when we come back to the prayer hall or when we listen to lecture, again we feel the same focus, no distraction, and it comes and goes. That is sarvarthada and ekagrita. They come and they go, they emerge and they disappear. That's the idea behind. Now, this wavering, when it comes to an end, then what happens? That state is called samadhi. That is called samadhi state. Now, this is in yoga system the lowest state of samadhi, lowest of the three. So we should remember this is the lowest. The highest is mentioned in the 9th sutra. What is the 9th sutra? Nirodha Parinama, where this higher Nirodha Samskara naturally, effortlessly, simultaneously blocks any emerging negative samskaras. This goes on without any effort on our part. That's the idea behind it. It goes on. We may not be aware of it. See, when we go to a place, feel a great attraction for something, but immediately the higher Nirodha Samskara will block it. So we may not be aware of it. Our goal should be to reach that state where our own mind effortlessly, naturally, spontaneously crushes or suppresses the negativity that is there in our own mind. That is the sutra, that is the 9th sutra. And this particular sutra, in the 11th sutra, it discusses samadhi parinama, which is the lowest of the three. The next one is 12th sutra. Okay. The 12th sutra is this, let me see. Yashanto dido tulya pratyayo chittasya ekagrita parinamaha. That is the 12th sutra. Shanto dido tulya pratyayo chittasya ekagrita parinamaha. After that, that is, after that higher state, what happens? In a more advanced state, when the rise and fall of the same pratyaya takes place, that particular transformation is called ekagrita parinamaha. Ekagrita parinamaha is the second highest, middle level, and the highest is we already discussed in the 9th sutra. As I mentioned, Patanjali here doesn't follow a specific natural order. That's why Nirodha Parinama, the highest Parinama, mental transformation, is mentioned in the 9th sutra, and Ekagrita Parinama that we discussed just now is mentioned in the 12th sutra, and Samadhi Parinama, which is the lowest, is mentioned in the 11th sutra. So, the 12th sutra, 12th sutra mentions the result, the benefit. That means, what it says is, when we reach this state, then we will be able to do whatever we want to do. We will be able to do with great enthusiasm, great energy. At the same time, we will be able to practice a degree of detachment. Which means you do your best with full concentration, with full efficiency and effectiveness. And at the same time, we won't feel any anxiety or worry. We are able to work with great efficiency. At the same time, we are able to practice detachment, a natural process of detachment. So, in fact, this is the essence of Karma Yoga. in its most advanced state. But here it is mentioned in the context of this Ekagrita Parinama, which is, as I mentioned, is the second highest. So there are certain important points to remember here. Samadhi Parinama applies to Chitta as a whole. It refers to the Chitta with different vrittis and different pritayas getting transformed into Ekagrita. From Samadhi Parinama, you go to the next stage. Samadhi Parinama is the lowest. From there you go to the next stage, I mean the second highest, that is Ekagrita Parinama. From there you go to the highest, that is ninth sutra, that is Nirodha Parinama. So this particular sutra tells you that when you reach this state, you are able to practice this transformation. When you reach this state, this rise and fall of the same pratyaya takes place, and the transformation is experienced in the form of peace, happiness, etc. Of course, this has got different meanings that we can discuss later in the coming session. Now we can have interaction. You are most welcome to ask questions. Yeah.
Hari Om Swamiji.
Hari Om.
Swamiji, one question that I had is, you were talking about how Ekagrita and distraction, these keep coming in cycles, and you spend some time with Ekagrita, and then after some time you go into a distraction mode. Right? So is distraction completely eliminatable, or is it an active part of the cycle? Is it necessary for Ekagrita to also be achieved from time to time?
So here in the 11th sutra, you can find the discussion is called Ekagrita Parinama. It's 11th. It is the 12th sutra. The 12th sutra you can find this Ekagrita Parinama is mentioned, and the 11th sutra it actually discusses the Samadhi Parinama, the lowest. So there two words are used. One is Sarvartha, the other is Ekagrita. So this is what we normally find when we practice dhyana after dharana. So dharana is the first state of samyama. But when you try to practice meditation, what happens? You may be able to practice Ekagrita, concentration for some time, but after some time mind goes about wandering. At the mental level, mind connects with memories from previous actions and experiences. We may suddenly, in our mind, this mental visual image will arise. I was sitting in the office, I was traveling by train, we were playing, or I have an appointment to make next day, and all these thought currents. Now these thought currents come, not just the thought currents, they will be followed by visual imageries, mentally again, subtle visual imageries. When you think about the office place also will come. If you have seen, the visual image will come. Even if you have not seen, suppose you are going to a place that you have not seen, when you think about this, still the thought will come, but the imagery will come, but it will be subtle, it will be vague, it will not be clear. Still something will come. What will the office look like? So what happens, all these thoughts will come. So mind will go on connecting with all arthas. Artha here means, arthidedi artha means object that you connect with. Eyes seeing certain things. And through that activity, the visual image enters your mind. The ears hear certain things. And through that activity, we are actually hearing the sound coming from a car. The image of a car also can enter the mind. So mind takes that form. Like that, whatever artha, whatever object becomes a source of distraction, that will immediately color in our mental screen. So what happens? One after another. This is sarvartha. So it comes and goes. Concentration for some time, then distraction for some time. But as you go further, what happens, this Nirodha Samskara increases automatically. When Nirodha Samskara increases, then you won't feel the distraction. As soon as these negative, distracting images or thought currents emerge in your mind, it will block it. You may not be aware of it. It happens at the subconscious level. Because you don't have to make any effort for that. So how do we evolve this Nirodha Samskara? Nirodha Samskaras means positive samskaras, healthy samskaras, helpful samskaras, like an armor plate. So when a negative thought current comes as a distraction, as an obstacle, immediately your vast storehouse of Nirodha Samskaras will come and block it. You may not be aware of it. This happens, there are two types of problems, Of course, I should relate to psychiatry in this context. Now, I can give an example. Suppose you are suffering from a problem called washomania. You go on washing your hands. The patient sometimes go on washing the hands, and it takes more and more painful and physical form. And he goes on washing to such an extent, and this happens. I have read in books. This happens depends on the cultural societies. You may be coming from a very traditional Indian family, so you can think of it. This is Vignesh is asking the question. Vignesh, can you hear me?
Yes, Maharaj. Yes.
Vignesh is asking the question.
Yes, I will ask.
So
yes.
I want to make this discussion a little more active. You don't mind? You have seen very old Orthodox religious people in India taking bath again and again, feeling that they have not bathed enough. You have seen that? You heard about it? Maybe.
Yes, Maharaj.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you for admitting. So I'm really addressing a real problem. You can find it's just like you watch again and again. You are actually locked the door again and again. Or you wash your hands again and again, or germomania, we call it. Some kind of fascination, obsession, washing hands, bacteria or something. Or Orthodox people in India, those who go to temples every day, very Orthodox, they feel like we have not taken bath, again and again taking bath. So you have seen that. Now,
yes.
Suppose this is actually an example, it's a distraction, really speaking. It's a distraction. And it comes out of some previous memories where they have taken bath but they did not take bath properly, or they may have thought they have locked a room but actually they did not lock. It happened, maybe some robber broke into your home. So that fear, that memory makes you check again and again whether the door is locked again. Am I right? Is it so?
Yes.
Now, how to block it? This can be blocked. So of course, I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm talking from the standpoint of Patanjali. Let us say Dr. Patanjali, calling the doctor, the great doctor of all doctors. Now, what he says is, Nirodha Samskara will block it. How do we practice Nirodha Samskara? Positive Samskaras. You can say, that the room is locked, the doubt arises in the mind. I am not locked the room. Well, even if I am not locked the room, what am I going to lose? It doesn't matter. If with this thought, you can block that obsession.
So Maharaj, then is it fair to say that in some sense, the negative OCD, which you are already having, is being replaced with a positive OCD? So you are actually having some sort of samskaras which guide you and which you keep going back to, but these are more positive than negative.
I mentioned to you earlier, Patanjali's system doesn't think of total eradication of samskaras. Samskara shesha. The purpose of Patanjali's system is to burn your samskaras, like the way you burn seed. So once you burn the seed and you put in a fertile soil, it doesn't sprout. So these samskaras can be totally, completely neutralized. They can become totally ineffective. They will not produce any negative vrittis, vasanas of samskaras when you neutralize it. So this Nirodha Samskara is one way of reaching this particular goal. As I mentioned, Nirodha Samskara is the highest. When you reach that stage, automatically your wrong ideas or obsessions that emerge in the mind will be automatically blocked by the Nirodha Samskaras. The negativity is called Vyuthana Samskara. That medicine, Nirodha Samskara is called Nirodha Samskara, with which you neutralize, you block, you suppress negative samskaras. I mean Vyuthana Samskaras. So what I mean to say, if a person becomes wise enough, well, I have not locked my room, so I should check again and again. You have some little money there. But suppose what will happen? What is going to happen if I lose all the money? So I won't worry. You'll be free from that obsession. So that's why now Patanjali approaches the whole problem from the standpoint of samskaras. That's a unique contribution of Patanjali. Vyasa in his commentaries, he has, of course he wrote one commentary, and of course other commentaries, Tattwamayananda, Vajaspati and Vijnana Bhikshu, Yoga Bhashavartikam and other books, they have elaborated on this mechanism, this psychological mechanism of samskaras. It's a very unique method. So without medicine, through some kind of higher practice, which eventually becomes a spiritual practice, you can live a healthy life. Especially Abhyasa, Vairagya, all these will be mentioned in the coming Ekatattva Abhyasa. It will come, I think, 32nd Sutras and goes to continue Vibhudipada. So all these will be discussed in the coming sessions.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you won't mind my asking these questions, because sometimes this direct interactions is very helpful.
Of course, Maharaj. Yes.
Many phobias and many obsessions can be neutralized, can be remedied, cured by applying some of Patanjali's principles, especially at their earlier levels, but not when they become advanced, more complicated, but the early level, many of these problems can be overcome by applying certain psychological methods.
Thanks, Maharaj.
Thank you.
Hi, Swamiji.
Yeah.
You talked a bit about the natural state of detachment at the higher level, and I'm curious to understand what some practices or principles to practice detachment in day-to-day life, for example, in our job, that we can do now before we get to the kind of higher state where there's a natural state of detachment.
Yeah, you're talking about applying the principle, the mechanism of detachment. That's what you're talking about? Okay. So
Yeah.
as I'm mentioning, if we can do our best with all our concentration, enthusiasm and efficiency, at the same time, if we can practice detachment, the advantage is we will be able to do whatever we are doing very efficiently, very effectively. At the same time, we won't feel any anxiety or any worry. So, of course, it cannot be practiced all of a sudden, but we can be sure that when we do our work, whatever work we are doing, with full efficiency and concentration, the work will be really effective and successful. So there is no room for any anxiety and worry. So, but still we can say, well, still all these things will come and go. This is a principle of Vedanta. The Vairagya aspect, Paravairagya, all these, the relative renunciation, the absolute renunciation, the detachment, different levels are discussed in the Yoga Sutra literature. But in Vedanta, especially Advaita Vedanta, tells you that everything about this world in which we live and all that we do in our everyday activities, even the most successful achievements, all belong to that category of the relative. I mean, the non-absolute, the non-eternal, the impermanent. That's what Vedanta says, Advaita Vedanta. It's a fact, actually. It's a fact. That's why I say the Advaita Vedanta in reality is pure, simple common sense in real life. It's a fact which everyone knows. Even a primary school student knows that everything that you accumulate in life will one day disappear. At least we are going to disappear one day or other. So naturally, all these things won't be with us. It's a fact. But the point is, we frequently forget it. A crematorium manager, every day he sees the body, the dead body being pushed to the tube, becomes ash, becomes gas. Still, when he returns home, he thinks his body is going to be there till eternity. Not as a principle, but we frequently forget the relativity, the changeability, the impermanence of these worldly things. In that sense, I'm talking. Now, if you can actually remember this obvious fact, this totally indisputable fact, that everything in this world, including wealth, job, all these things are impermanent. If you can remember. Now, you don't have to be a philosopher, you don't have to be a Shankaracharya to understand Advaita Vedanta as pure common sense. It's a pure common sense. So Vedanta in its simple form is a fact of our life. It's a physical fact, not a philosophical concept. It's a physical fact. So if we can always remember this obvious truth that we frequently forget, that's Vedanta. So we forget, so we go through all these concerns and worries and problems, and we are not able to practice detachment. Once we remember the obvious fact that everything is impermanent, then we won't be obsessed with that. And that absence of obsession is called detachment. Detachment doesn't mean indifference, negation, or giving up anything. I mean understanding the obvious reality that everything is impermanent. That's all. That's why Vedanta is pure, simple common sense. If you want, you can call it spiritual common sense. Maybe more correct, accurate way of describing it. So thank you for all these questions. So we hope to meet you next Sunday. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Namaste.
The recording has stopped.
Yo, Maharaj.
Thank you. Thank you for the question.